There is a poem from the 9th century AD. It was written by Bai Juyi, one of the greatest poets of the Tang Dynasty. It tells the story of an emperor who loved a woman so much that he lost his empire. It describes her beauty in lines that have been memorized by schoolchildren for 1200 years. It ends with a scene so famous that it has been painted, staged, filmed, and sung across every medium that has ever existed. The poem is called The Song of Everlasting Sorrow, and it begins like this. The Emperor of Han, desiring beauty, had searched for many years without success. But this is not a story about the Emperor of Han. Bai Juyi used an old convention. He wrote about the Han Dynasty to avoid directly criticizing the Tang. Everyone who heard the poem knew who he really meant. He meant Emperor Xuanzong, and he meant Yang Guifei. Yang Guifei was born in 719 AD, during the golden age of the Tang Dynasty. The Tang was the most powerful, most prosperous, most culturally brilliant empire on earth. Its capital, Chang'an, was the largest city in the world, over 1 million people, filled with merchants from Persia, monks from India, musicians from Central Asia. The Tang produced the greatest poetry in Chinese history, the greatest painting, the greatest sculpture. It was an empire at the height of its glory. And then, in the span of a single rebellion, it collapsed. The rebellion lasted 8 years, killed millions. It shattered the Tang's power, its confidence, its sense of itself as the center of the world. And at the center of the catastrophe was a woman, Yang Guifei. She was not born into the imperial family. She was the daughter of a minor official, raised in a household that valued education, music, and dance. She was beautiful. The chronicles describe her in the conventional terms of classical Chinese poetry. Skin like jade, hair like clouds, a face that could topple kingdoms. But what made her extraordinary was not her beauty. It was her intelligence, her wit, her understanding of power. She entered the imperial court not as an emperor's concubine, but as the wife of one of the emperor's sons. When the emperor saw her, he wanted her. In Tang Dynasty China, this was not unusual. Emperors took what they wanted. What was unusual was what happened next. She did not become just another concubine. She became the most powerful woman in the empire. Emperor Xuanzong had ruled for decades. He had made the Tang great. He had expanded its borders, patronized its arts, built its greatest monuments. He was, by any standard, one of the most successful emperors in Chinese history. And then, in his 60s, he met Yang Guifei. The chronicles say he neglected his duties. They say he spent his days composing music for her, watching her dance, holding banquets in her honor. They say his ministers could not reach him. His generals could not see him. His empire drifted while he loved her. This is the story that has been told for 1200 years. An old emperor, bewitched by a young beauty, losing the empire he spent his life building. But there is another story underneath it. Yang Guifei was not simply a beautiful woman who distracted an emperor from his work. She was a political actor. She understood the factions in the court, the rivalries between the great families, the ambitions of the generals. And she used her position to shape the empire's direction. Her cousin, Yang Guizhong, became the most powerful minister in the government. Her sisters married into the most influential families. Her network extended across the court, the military, the bureaucracy. She was not a passive object of the emperor's affection. She was a player, which meant that when the empire began to fall apart, she was also a target. The rebellion began in 755 AD. Its leader was An Lushan, a general of Sogdian and Turkic origin, who had risen through the ranks of the Tang military. He was charming, ambitious, and ruthless. He had been a favorite of Emperor Xuanzong, and, according to some accounts, a favorite of Yang Guifei as well. When An Lushan turned against the Tang, he did not simply march on the capital. He framed his rebellion as a rescue mission. He was saving the empire from the corrupt ministers who had misled the emperor, from the women who had bewitched him, from the Yang family that had hijacked the government. This was a lie. An Lushan wanted the throne for himself, but the lie worked because it tapped into a deeper truth. The Tang elite had been growing resentful of the Yang family's power. They had watched Yang Guizhong accumulate titles and wealth. They had seen Yang Guifei's sisters marry into their rivals' houses. They had muttered in the corners of the court that the emperor had lost his way. Now they had a rebellion, and they needed someone to blame. The emperor fled the capital. Chang'an fell to the rebels. The imperial court, the great families, the ministers and generals and servants, all of them streamed out of the city, heading west, trying to reach safety in Sichuan. At a place called Mawei Station, the army stopped. The soldiers had been marching for days. They were exhausted, frightened, angry. They had lost their homes, their positions, their sense of order. And they wanted someone to pay. They surrounded the emperor's tent and demanded that Yang Guifei be executed. The emperor hesitated. The soldiers killed him anyway. And then they demanded Yang Guifei. The chronicles say the emperor begged for her life. They say he wept. They say he tried to reason with the generals, to persuade them that she was innocent, that she had done nothing wrong. It did not matter. The soldiers said, "The empire has fallen because of her. She must die." There is no record of what Yang Guifei said in those final moments. There is no record of whether she protested or begged, or accepted her fate in silence. There is only the fact of her death, strangled by a eunuch, in a lonely station on the road to exile, while the man who loved her watched. She was 37 years old. After her death, the rebellion continued. An Lushan was assassinated by his own son. The Tang eventually regained control of the capital. Emperor Xuanzong abdicated in favor of his son, and spent his final years in grief, writing poems about the woman he had lost. The Tang survived, but it was never the same. The Golden Age was over. The empire limped on for another century and a half, weakened, fractured, haunted by the memory of what it had been. And at the center of that memory was a woman. For 1200 years, the story of Yang Guifei has been told as a cautionary tale. She is the beauty who brought down an empire, the temptress who distracted a great emperor from his duties, the woman who destroyed everything. But this is not the real story. The real story is about power, who holds it, who wants it, who gets blamed when it collapses. Yang Guifei did not cause the An Lushan Rebellion. A general with an army caused it. She did not destroy the Tang. A civil war destroyed it. She did not corrupt the government. The government was already corrupt, already fractured, already vulnerable to exactly the kind of ambition that An Lushan embodied. But she was the most convenient target. She was a woman. She was beautiful. She had no army, no faction, no institutional base. She had only the emperor's love, and when the army turned against him, that love became her death sentence. Bai Juyi's poem ends with a ghost. Years after Yang Guifei's death, the emperor sends a Taoist priest to search for her spirit. The priest travels to the islands of the immortals, beyond the reach of mortal men, and there he finds her. She gives him a message for the emperor. She tells him to remember their vows, their love, the life they shared before the world tore them apart. And she gives him a token, a gold hairpin broken in two, one half for her, one half for him. It is one of the most beautiful endings in all of Chinese poetry. It transforms a political catastrophe into a love story. It turns a woman who was murdered by a mutinous army into a ghost who still loves the man who failed to save her. But it is also a lie. Yang Guifei did not haunt the emperor from a celestial island. She rotted in a grave at Mawei Station. The poem that made her immortal was written decades after her death, by a poet who never met her, for an audience that wanted romance instead of truth. And for 1200 years, that romance has been more powerful than the reality. We remember her as the beauty who brought down an empire. We do not remember her as the woman who tried to survive in a court that would sacrifice her the moment it became convenient. We remember the poem. We do not remember the woman. But maybe there is a way to see her differently. Yang Guifei lived in an empire at the height of its power. She watched it collapse. She died at the hands of the men who were supposed to protect her. She was not a monster. She was not a temptress. She was not the ruin of a dynasty. She was a woman who had the misfortune to be beautiful, intelligent, and ambitious in a world that punished women for all three. And when the empire fell, the men who failed to save it needed someone to blame. They chose her. They always choose her.